And I'm back. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Shaggy. I'm Philalitea, and we are here for Spoopyween Day 13, wherein I am going to read from Edward Bulwer Lytton's The Coming Race. This book was originally published, I believe, in the 1800s. I gotta wash my hair and my face. I'm allergic to the oils in my hair, and it's gonna make me itch and break out. It's gonna be exceedingly uncomfortable, and it's gonna leave me unable to focus. I'm gonna do a chapter or two, because if you're doing a book club, if you're doing any kind of group reading, and you do more than about 2 chapters of the author's work, regardless of the intention of the story arc, if you read more than about 2 chapters, only those who are in the group to compete with their ability to consume the thing you're reading or anything, the material, the media, are going to pay attention and participate. So we're going to do a chapter or 2, about an hour. If the chapter is only 15 minutes, we'll do 15 minutes. But the goal is about an hour. I'm pretty tired. I did suck down a little bit of Mountain Dew before I came down here. So we'll see what my endurance looks like. We'll see where we are in 55 minutes or so. And we'll see. We'll see what's the what. This is Edward Bulwer Lytton's The Coming Race. Let's see. The Kindle doesn't have as much information as far as when it was published. I'm pretty sure this was in the 1800s. This book, just for anyone who doesn't know, informed everything the Nazis believed. And it informs everything that Theosophy, Spiritism, and New Age believe. So, for Spoopyween, I'll read for you what I find horrifying. And that's that millions of people believe that this obvious fiction is real. Chapter 1. I am a native of blank in the United States of America. My ancestors migrated from England in the reign of Charles II. Why this is so bright, it hurts my eyes. And my grandfather was not undistinguished in the War of Independence. My family, therefore, enjoyed a somewhat high social position in right of birth, and being also opulent, they were considered disqualified for the public service. My father once ran for Congress, but was signally defeated by his tailor. After that event, he interfered little in politics and lived much in his library. I was the eldest of 3 sons and sent at the age of 16 to the old country, partly to complete my literary education, partly to commence my commercial training in a mercantile firm at Liverpool. My father died shortly after I was 21, and being left well off and having a taste for travel and adventure, I resigned, for a time, all pursuit of the almighty dollar, and became a desultory wanderer over the face of the earth. In the year 18 blank, happening to be in blank, I was invited by a professional engineer with whom I had made acquaintance to visit the recesses of the blank mine upon which I was employed. The reader will understand, ere he close this narrative, my reason for concealing all clue to the district of which I write, and will perhaps thank me for refraining from any description that may tend to its discovery. Let me say, then, as briefly as possible, that I accompanied the engineer into the interior of the mine and became so strangely fascinated by its gloomy wonders, and so interested in my friend's explorations, that I prolonged my stay in the neighborhood and descended daily for some weeks into the vaults and galleries, hollowed by nature and art beneath the surface of the earth. The engineer was persuaded that far richer deposits of mineral wealth than had yet been detected would be found in a new shaft that had been commenced under his operations. In piercing this shaft, we came one day upon a chasm jagged and seemingly charred at the sides, as if burst asunder at some distant period by volcanic fires. Down this chasm, my friend caused himself to be lowered in a cage, having first tested the atmosphere by the safety lamp. He remained nearly an hour in the abyss. When he returned, he was very pale, and with an anxious, thoughtful expression of face very different from its ordinary character, which was open, cheerful, and fearless. He said briefly that the descent appeared to him unsafe and leading to no result, and, suspending further operations in the shaft, we returned to the more familiar parts of the mine. All the rest of that day the engineer seemed preoccupied by some absorbing thought. He was unusually taciturn, and there was a scared, bewildered look in his eyes, as that of a man who has seen a ghost. At night, as we two were sitting alone in the lodging we shared together near the mouth of the mine, I said to my friend, "Tell me frankly what you saw in that chasm. I am sure it was something strange and terrible. Whatever it be, it has left your mind in a state of doubt. In such a case, two heads are better than one. Confide in me." The engineer long endeavored to evade my inquiries, but as, while he spoke, he helped himself unconsciously out of the brandy flask to a degree to which he was wholly unaccustomed, for he was a very temperate man, his reserve gradually melted away. He who would keep himself to himself should imitate the dumb animals and drink water. At last he said, "I will tell you all. When the cage stopped, I found myself on a ridge of rock, and below me the chasm, taking a slanting direction, shot down to a considerable depth, the darkness of which my lamp could not have penetrated. But through it, to my infinite surprise, streamed upward a steady, brilliant light. Could it be any volcanic fire? In that case, surely I should have felt the heat. Still, if on this there was doubt, it was of the utmost importance to our common safety to clear it up. I examined the sides of the descent and found that I could venture to trust myself to the irregular protection of ledges, at least for some way. I left the cage and clambered down. As I drew nearer and nearer to the light, the chasm became wider, and at last I saw, to my unspeakable amaze, a broad, level road at the bottom of the abyss, illumined as far as the eye could reach by what seemed artificial gas lamps, placed at regular intervals, as in the thoroughfare of a great city. And I heard confusedly at a distance a hum as of human voices. I know, of course, that no rival miners are at work in this district. Whose could be those voices? What human hands could have leveled that road and marshaled those lamps? The superstitious belief common to miners that gnomes or fiends dwell within the bowels of the earth began to seize me. I shuddered at the thought of descending further and braving the inhabitants of this nether valley. Nor, indeed, could I have done so without ropes, as from the spot I had reached to the bottom of the chasm, the sides of the rock sank down abrupt, smooth, and sheer. I retraced my steps with some difficulty. Now I have told you all. You will descend again. I ought, yet I feel as if I durst not. A trusty companion halves the journey and doubles the courage. I will go with you. We will provide ourselves with ropes of suitable strength and length. And pardon me, you will not drink more tonight. Our hands and feet must be steady and firm tomorrow. Chapter 2. With the morning, my friend's nerves were rebraced, and he was not less excited by curiosity than myself. Perhaps more, for he evidently believed in his own story, and I felt considerable doubt of it. Not that he would have willfully told an untruth, but that I thought he must have been under one of those hallucinations which seize on our fancy or our nerves in solitary, unaccustomed places, and in which we give shape to the formless and sound to the dumb. Hey, buddy, I don't have anything. I don't have any food for you, pal. I didn't remember to get you a snack. We selected 6 veteran miners to watch our descent, and as the cage held only one at a time, the engineer descended first. And when he had gained the ledge at which he had been before halted, the cage rearose for me. I soon gained his side. We had provided ourselves with a strong coil of rope. The light struck on my side as it had done the day before on my friend's. The hollow through which it came sloped diagonally. It seemed that through which it came, sorry. It seemed to me a diffused atmospheric light, not that like that from fire, but soft and silvery as from a northern star. Quitting the cage, we descended, one after another, easily enough, owing to the juts in the side, still till we reached the place at which my friend had previously halted, and which was a projection just spacious enough to allow us to stand abreast. From this spot the chasm widened rapidly like the lower end of a vast funnel, and I saw distinctly the valley, the road, the lamps, which my companion had described. He had exaggerated nothing. I heard the sounds he had heard, mingled, indescribable hum as of voices and a dull tramp as of feet. Straining my eye farther down, I clearly beheld at a distance the outline of some large building. It could not be mere natural rock, it was too symmetrical, with huge, heavy, Egyptian like columns, and the whole lighted as from within. I had about me a small pocket telescope, and by the aid of this I could distinguish near the building I mentioned, 2 forms which seemed human, though I could not be sure. At least they were living, for they moved and both vanished within the building. We now proceeded to attach the end of the rope we had brought with us to the ledge on which we stood. By the aid of clamps and grappling hooks, with which, as well as with necessary tools, we were provided. We were almost silent in our work. We toiled like men afraid to speak to each other. One end of the rope being thus apparently made firm to the ledge, the other, to which we fastened a fragment of the rock, rested on the ground below, a distance of some 50 feet. I was a younger man and a more active man than my companion, and having served on board ship in my boyhood, this mode of transit was far more familiar to me than to him. In a whisper, I claimed the precedence, so that when I gained the ground, I might serve to hold the rope more steady for his descent. I got safely to the ground beneath, and the engineer now began to lower himself. But he had scarcely accomplished 10 feet of the descent when the fastenings, which he had fancied so secure, gave way, or rather, the rock itself proved treacherous and crumbled beneath the strain, and the happy man was precipitated to the bottom, falling just at my feet and bringing down with his fall splinters of the rock, one of which, fortunately but a small one, struck me, and for the time stunned me. When I recovered my senses, I saw my companion, an inanimate mass, beside me, life utterly extinct. While I was bending over his corpse in grief and horror, I heard close at hand a strange sound between a snort and a hiss, and turning instinctively to the quarter from which it came, I saw emerging from a dark fissure in the rock a vast and terrible head with open jaws and dull, ghastly, hungry eyes, the head of a monstrous reptile, resembling that of the crocodile or alligator, but infinitely larger than the largest creature of that kind I had ever beheld in my travels. I started to my feet and fled down the valley at my utmost speed. I stopped at last, ashamed of my panic and my flight, and returned to the spot on which I had left the body of my friend. It was gone. Doubtless the monster had already drawn it into its den and devoured it. The rope and the grappling hook still lay where they had fallen, but they afforded me no chance of return. It was impossible to reattach them to the rock above, and the sides of the rock were too sheer and smooth for human steps to clamber. I was alone in this strange world, amidst the bowels of the earth. And that's the end of chapter 2. I could probably read this whole book very quickly. This is not a long book. These chapters are very short. Yeah, these chapters are like a page apiece. So, we will continue my 2 chapter recommendation for a book club, irrespective. Slowly and cautiously, I went my solitary way down the lamplit road and towards the large building I have described. The road itself seemed like a great alpine mass skirting rocky mountains of which the one through whose chasm I had descended formed a link. Deep below to the left lay a vast valley, which presented to my astonished eye, the unmistakable evidences of art and culture. There were fields covered with a strange vegetation similar to none I have seen above the earth. The color of it not green, but rather of a dull and leaden hue, or of a golden red. There were lakes and rivulets which seemed to have been curved into artificial banks, some of pure water, others that shone like pools of naphtha. At my right hand, ravines and defiles opened amidst the rocks, with passes between, evidently constructed by art and bordered by trees resembling, for the most part, gigantic ferns with exquisite varieties of feathery foliage, and stems like those of the palm tree. Others were more like the cane plant, but taller, bearing large clusters of flowers. Others again had the form of enormous fungi, with short, thick stems supporting a wide dome like roof, from which either rose or drooped long, slender branches. The whole scene behind, before, and beside me, far as the eye could reach, was brilliant with innumerable lamps. The world without a sun was bright and warm as an Italian landscape at noon, but the air less oppressive, the heat softer. Nor was the scene before me void of signs of habitation. I could distinguish at a distance, whether on the banks of the lake or rivulet, or halfway upon eminences, embedded amidst the vegetation, buildings that must surely be the homes of men. I could even discover, though far off, forms that appeared to me human moving amidst the landscape. As I paused to gaze, I saw to the right, gliding quickly through the air, what appeared a small boat, impelled by sails shaped like wings. It soon passed out of sight, descending amidst the shades of a forest. Right above me there was no sky, but only a cavernous roof. This roof grew higher and higher at the distance of the landscapes beyond, till it became imperceptible, as an atmosphere of haze formed itself beneath. Continuing my walk, I started from a bush that resembled a great tangle of seaweeds, interspersed with fern like shrubs and plants of large leafage shaped like that of the aloe or prickly pear, a curious animal about the size and shape of a deer. But as, after bounding away a few paces, it turned round and gazed at me inquisitively, I perceived that it was not like any species of deer now extant above the earth, but it brought instantly to my recollection a plaster cast I had seen in some museum of a variety of the elk stag, said to have existed before the deluge. The creature seemed tame enough, and, after inspecting me a moment or two, began to graze on the singular herbage, around, undismayed, and careless. Chapter 4. I now came in full sight of the building. Yes, it had been made by hands, and hollowed partly out of a great rock. I should have supposed it at the first sight, the first glance, to have been of the earliest form of Egyptian architecture. It was fronted by huge columns tapering upward from massive plinths, and with capitals that, as I came nearer, I perceived to be more ornamental and more fantastically graceful. That Egyptian architecture allows. That should be than architecture allows. As the Corinthian capital mimics the leaf of the acanthus, so the capitals of these columns imitated the foliage of the vegetation neighboring them, some aloe like, some fern like, and now there came out of this building a form, a human. Was it human? It stood on the broad way and looked around, beheld me, and approached. It came within a few yards of me, and at the sight and presence of it, an indescribable awe and tremor seized me, rooting my feet to the ground. It reminded me of symbolical images of genius or daemon that are seen on Etruscan vases or limned on the walls of Eastern sepulchres, images that borrow the outlines of man and are yet of another race. It was tall, not gigantic, but tall as the tallest man below the heights of giants, or below the height of giants. Its chief covering seemed to me to be composed of large wings folded over its breast and reaching to its knees. The rest of its attire was composed of an undertunic and leggings of some thin, fibrous material. It wore on its head a kind of tiara that shone with jewels, and carried in its right hand a slender staff of bright metal like polished steel. But the face! It was that which inspired my awe and my terror. It was the face of a man, but yet of a type of man distinct from our known extant races. The nearest approach to it in outline and expression is the face of the sculptured Sphinx, so regular in its calm, intellectual, mysterious beauty. Its color was peculiar, more like that of the red man than any other variety of our species, and yet different from it, a richer and softer hue, with large black eyes, deep and brilliant, and brows arched as a semicircle. The face was beardless, but a nameless something in the aspect, tranquil though the expression, and beauteous though the features, roused that instinct of danger which the sight of a tiger or serpent arouses. I felt that this man like image was endowed with forces inimical to man. As it drew near, a cold shudder came over me. I fell on my knees and covered my face with my hands. Chapter 5. A voice accosted me, a very quiet and very musical key of voice, in a language of which I could not understand a word, but it served to dispel my fear. I uncovered my face and looked up. The stranger, I could scarcely bring myself to call him man, surveyed me with an eye that seemed to read to the very depths of my heart. He then placed his hand on my forehead and, with the staff in his right, gently touched my shoulder. The effect of this double contact was magical. In place of my former terror, there passed into me a sense of contentment, of joy, of confidence in myself and in the being before me. I rose and spoke in my own language. He listened to me with apparent attention, but with a slight surprise in his looks, and shook his head, as if to signify that I was not understood. He then took me by the hand and led me in silence in the building, or to the building. The entrance was open. Indeed, there was no door to it. We entered an immense hall, lighted by the same kind of luster as in the scene without, but diffusing a fragrant odor. The floor was in large tessellated blocks of precious metals, and partly covered with a sort of mat-like carpeting. A strain of low music above and around undulated as if from invisible instruments, seeming to belong naturally to the place, just as the sound of murmuring waters belongs to a rocky landscape, or the warble of birds to vernal groves. A figure in a simpler garb than that of my guide, but of similar fashion, was standing motionless near the threshold. My guide touched it twice with his staff, and it put itself into a rapid and gliding movement, skimming noiselessly over the floor. Gazing on it, I then saw that it was no living form, but a mechanical automaton. It might be 2 minutes after it vanished through a doorless opening, half screened by curtains at the other end of the hall, when through the same opening advanced a boy of about 12 years old, with features closely resembling those of my guide, so that they seemed to me evidently son and father. On seeing me, the child uttered a cry and lifted his staff like that borne by my guide, as if in as if in menace. At a word from the elder, he dropped it. The two then conversed for some moments, examining me while they spoke. The child touched my garments and stroked my face with evident curiosity, uttering a sound like a laugh, but with an hilarity more subdued than the mirth of our laughter. Presently the roof of the hall opened, and a platform descended, seemingly constructed on the same principle as the lifts used in hotels and warehouses for mounting from one story to another. The stranger placed himself and the child on the platform and motioned for me to do the same, which I did. We ascended quickly and safely and alighted in the midst of a corridor with doorways on either side. Through one of these doorways I was conducted into a chamber fitted up with an oriental splendor. The walls were tessellated with spars and metals and uncut jewels. Cushions and divans abounded. Apertures, as for windows but unglazed, were made in the chamber opening to the floor, and as I passed along I observed that these openings led into spacious balconies, and commanded views of the illuminated landscape without. In cages suspended from the ceiling there were birds of strange form and bright plumage, which at our entrance set up a chorus of song modulated into tune, as is that of our piping bullfinches. A delicious fragrance from censers of gold elaborately sculptured filled the air. Several automata, like the one I had seen, stood dumb and motionless by the walls. The stranger placed me beside him on a divan, and again spoke to me, and again I spoke, but without the least advance towards understanding each other. But now I began to feel the effects of the blow I had received from the splinters of the falling rock more acutely than I had done at first. There came over me a sense of sickly faintness, accompanied with acute, lancinating pains in the head and neck. I sank back on the seat and strove in vain to stifle a groan. On this, the child, who had hitherto seemed to eye me with distrust or dislike, knelt by my side to support me. Taking one of my hands in both his own, he approached, his lips to my forehead, breathing on it softly. In a few moments, my pain ceased. A drowsy, heavy calm crept over me. I fell asleep. How long I remained in this state I do not know, but when I woke I felt perfectly restored. My eyes opened upon a group of silent forms, seated around me in the gravity and quietude of Orientals, all more or less like the first stranger. The same mantling wings, the same fashion of garment, the same sphinx-like eyes, with the deep, dark eyes and red man's color. Above all, the same type of race akin to man's, but infinitely stronger of form and grandeur of aspect, and inspiring the same unsettlable, unutterable feeling of dread. Yet each countenance was mild and tranquil, even kindly in expression, and strangely enough, it seemed to me that in this very calm and benignity consisted the secret of the dread which the countenances inspired. They seemed as void of the lines and shadows which care and sorrow, and passion and sin, leave upon the faces of men, as are the faces of sculpted gods, or as, in the eyes of Christian mourners, seem the peaceful brows of the dead. I felt a warm hand on my shoulder. It was the child's. In his eyes there was a sort of a lofty pity and tenderness, such as that with which we may gaze on some suffering bird or butterfly. I shrank, I shrank from that touch. I shrank from that eye. I was vaguely impressed with a belief that, had he so pleased, that child could have killed me as easily as a man can kill a bird or a butterfly. The child seemed pained at my repugnance, quitted me, and placed himself beside one of the windows. The others continued to converse with each other in a low tone, and by their glances toward me I could perceive that I was the object of their conversation. One, in especial, seemed to be urging some proposal affecting me on the being whom I had first met, and this last, by his gesture, seemed about to assent to it, when the child suddenly quitted his post by the window, placed himself between me and the other forms as if in protection, and spoke quickly and eagerly. By some intuition or instinct, I felt that the child I had before so dreaded was pleading in my behalf. Ere he had crossed, another stranger entered the room. He appeared older than the rest, though not old, his countenance less smoothly serene than theirs, though equally regular in its features, equally regular in its features, seemed to me to have more the touch of a humanity akin to my own. He listened quietly to the words addressed to him, first by my guide, next by two others of the group, and lastly by the child, then turned towards myself and addressed me, not by words, but by signs and gestures. These I fancied that I perfectly understood, and I was not mistaken. I comprehended that he inquired whence I came. I extended my arm and pointed towards the road which had led me from the chasm in the rock. Then an idea seized me. I drew forth my pocketbook and sketched on one of its blank leaves a rough design of the rock ledge, the rope, myself clinging to it, then of the cavernous rock below, the head of the reptile, the lifeless form of my friend. I gave this primitive kind of hieroglyph to my interrogator, who, after inspecting it gravely, handed it to his next neighbor, and it thus passed round the group. The being I had at first encountered then said a few words, and the child, who approached and looked at my drawing, nodded as if he comprehended its purport, and, returning to the window, expanded the wings attached to his form, shook them once or twice, and then launched himself into space without. I started up in amaze and hastened to the window. The child was already in the air, buoyed on the wings, which he did not flap to and fro as a bird does, but which were elevated over his head and seemed to bear him aloft steadily without effort of his own. His flight seemed as swift as an eagle's, and I observed that it was towards the rock whence I had described, of which the outline loomed visible in the brilliant atmosphere. In a very few minutes he returned, skimming through the opening from which he had gone, and dropping to the floor the rope and grappling hooks I had left at the descent from the chasm. Some words in a low tone passed between the beings present. One of the group touched an automaton, which started forward and glided from the room. Then the last comer, who had addressed me by gestures, rose, took me by the hand, and led me into the corridor. There, the platform by which I had mounted awaited us. We placed ourselves on it and were lowered into the hall below. My new companion, still holding me by the hand, conducted me from the building into a street, so to speak, that stretched beyond it, with buildings on either side separated from each other by gardens bright with rich-colored vegetation and strange flowers. Interspersed amidst these gardens, which were divided from each other by low walls, or walking slowly along the road, were many forms similar to those I had already seen. Some of the passers-by, on observing me, approached my guide, evidently by their tones, looks, and gestures addressing to him inquiries about myself. In a few moments a crowd collected around us, examining me with great interest, as if I were some rare, wild animal. Yet, even in gratifying their curiosity, they preserved a grave and courteous demeanor, and after a few words from my guide, who seemed to me to deprecate obstruction in our road, they fell back with a stately inclination of head and resumed their own way, with tranquil indifference. Midway in this thoroughfare, we stopped at a building and that differed from those we had hitherto passed, inasmuch as it formed three sides of a vast court, at the angles of which were lofty pyramidal towers. And the open space between the sides was a circular fountain of colossal dimensions, and throwing up a dazzling spray of what seemed to me to be fire. We entered the building through an open doorway and came into an enormous hall, in which were several groups of children, all apparently employed in work at some great factory. There was a huge engine in the wall, which was in full play, with wheels and cylinders resembling our own steam engines, except that it was richly ornamented with precious stones and metals, and appeared to emanate a pale phosphorescent atmosphere of shifting light. Many of the children were at some mysterious work on this machinery. Others were seated before tables. I was not allowed to linger long enough to examine into the nature of their employment. Not one young voice was heard, not one young face turned to gaze on us. They were all still and indifferent as may be ghosts, through the midst of which pass unnoticed the forms of the living. Quitting this hall, my guide led me through a gallery richly painted in compartments, with a barbaric mixture of gold and the colors, like pictures by Louis Cranach. The subjects described on these walls appeared to my glance as intended to illustrate events in the history of the race amidst which I was admitted. In all there were figures, most of them like the man-like creatures I had seen, but not all in the same fashion of garb, nor all with wings. There were also the effigies of various animals and birds, wholly strange to me, with backgrounds depicting landscapes of buildings. So far as my imperfect knowledge of the pictorial art would allow me to inform an opinion, these paintings seemed very accurate in design and very rich in coloring, showing a perfect knowledge of perspective, but their details, not arranged according to the rules of composition acknowledged by our artists, wanting, as it were, a center, so that the effect was vague, scattered, confused, bewildering. They were like heterogeneous fragments of a dream of art. We now came into a room of moderate size in which was assembled what I afterwards knew to be the family of my guide, seated at a table spread as for a repast. The forms thus grouped were those of my guide's wife, his daughter, and two sons. I recognized at once the difference between the two sexes, though the two females were of taller stature and ampler proportions than the males, and their countenances, if still more symmetrical in outline and contour, were devoid of the softness and timidity of expression which give charm to the face of woman, as seen on the earth above. The wife wore no wings. The daughter wore wings longer than those of the males. My guide uttered a few words, on which all the persons seated arose, and with that peculiar mildness of look and manner which I have before noticed, and which is, in truth, the common attribute of this formidable race. They saluted me according to their fashion, which consists in laying the right hand very gently on the head and uttering a soft sibilant monosyllable, C, equivalent to welcome. The mistress of the house then seated me beside her and heaped a golden platter before me from one of the dishes. While I ate, and though the viands were new to me, I marveled more at the delicacy than the strangeness of their flavor. My companions conversed quietly, and so far as I could detect, with polite avoidance of any direct reference to myself or any obtrusive scrutiny of my appearance. Yet I was the first creature of that variety of the human race to which I belong that they had ever beheld, and was consequently regarded by them as a most curious and abnormal phenomenon. But all rudeness, is unknown to this people, and the youngest child is taught to despise any vehement emotional demonstration. When the meal was ended, my guide again took me by the hand, and, re-entering the gallery, touched a metallic plate inscribed with strange figures, and which I rightly conjectured to be of the nature of our telegraphs. A platform descended, but this time we mounted to a much greater height than in the former building, and found ourselves in a room of moderate dimensions, and which, in its general character, had much that might be familiar to the associations of a visitor from the upper world. There were shelves on the wall containing what appeared to be books, and indeed were so. Mostly were small, like our diamond duodecimos, shaped in the fashion of our volumes, and bound in sheets of fine metal. There were several curious-looking pieces of mechanism scattered about, apparently models, such as might be seen in the study of any professional mechanician. Four automata, mechanical contrivances which, with these people, answer the ordinary purposes of domestic service, stood phantom-like at each angle in the wall. In a recess was a low couch, or bed, with pillows. A window, with curtains of some fibrous material drawn aside, opened upon a large balcony. My host stepped out into the balcony. I followed him. We were on the uppermost story of one of the angular pyramids. The view beyond was of a wild and solemn beauty impossible to describe. The vast ranges of precipitous rock, which formed the distant background, the intermediate valleys of mystic many-colored herbage, the flash of waters, many of them like streams of roseate flame, the serene luster diffused over all by myriads of lamps, combined to form a whole of which no words of mine can convey adequate description. So splendid was it, yet so somber, so lovely, yet so awful. But my attention was soon diverted from these nether landscapes. Suddenly there arose, as from the streets below, a burst of joyous music. Then a winged form soared into the space. Another, as if in chase of the first, another and another, others after others, till the crowd grew thick and the number countless. But how describe the fantastic grace of these forms and their undulating movements? They appeared engaged in some sort of amusement, now forming into opposite squadrons, now scattering, now each group threading the other, soaring, descending, interweaving, severing, all in measured time to the music below, as if in the dance of the fabled Peri. I turned my gaze on my host in a feverish wonder. I ventured to place my head on the large wings that lay folded on his breast, and in doing so, a slight shock as of electricity passed through me. I recoiled in fear. My host smiled, and as if courteously to gratify my curiosity, slowly expanded his pinions. I observed that his garment beneath them became dilated as a bladder that fills with air. The arms seemed to slide into the wings, and in another moment he had launched himself into the luminous atmosphere and hovered there, still, with outspread wings as an eagle that basks in the sun. Then, rapidly as an eagle swoops, he rushed downwards into the midst of one of the groups, skimming through the midst, and as suddenly again soaring aloft. Thereon, three forms, in one of which I thought to recognize my host's daughter, detached themselves from the rest and followed him as a bird sportively follows a bird. My eyes, dazzled with the lights and bewildered by the throng, ceased to distinguish the gyrations and evolutions of these winged playmates, till presently my host re-emerged from the crowd and alighted at my side. The strangeness of all I had seen, began now to operate on my senses. Fast, my mind itself began to wander, though not inclined to be superstitious, nor hitherto believing that man could be brought into bodily communication with demons. I felt the terror and the wild excitement with which, in the Gothic ages, a traveler might have persuaded himself that he witnessed a sabbat of fiends and witches. I have a vague recollection of having attempted, with vehement gesticulation, and forms of exorcism and loud, incoherent words, to repel my courteous and indulgent ghost, of his mild endeavors to calm and soothe me, of his intelligent conjecture that my fright and bewilderment were occasioned by the difference of form and movement between us, which the wings that had excited my marveling curiosity had, in exercise, made still more strongly perceptible, of the gentle smile with which he had sought to dispel my alarm, by dropping the wings to the ground and endeavoring to show me that they were but a mechanical contrivance. That sudden transformation did but increase my horror, and as extreme fright often shows itself by extreme daring, I sprang at his throat like a wild beast. On an instant I was felled to the ground as by an electric shock, and the last confused images floating before my sight, ere I became wholly insensible, were the form of my host kneeling beside me with one hand on my forehead, and the beautiful calm face of his daughter, with large, deep, inscrutable eyes intently fixed upon my own. In Chapter 5. Chapter 6. I remained in this unconscious state, as I afterwards learned, for many days, even for some weeks, according to our computation of time. When I recovered, I was in a strange room. My host and all his family were gathered round me, and to my utter amaze, my host's daughter accosted me in my own language with a slightly foreign accent. "How do you feel?" she asked. It was some moments before I could overcome my surprise enough to falter out, "You know my language? How? Who and what are you?" My host smiled and motioned to one of his sons, who then took from a table a number of thin metallic sheets on which were traced drawings of various figures, a house, a tree, a bird, a man, etc. In these designs, I recognized my own style of drawing. Under each figure was written the name of it in my language and in my writing, and in another handwriting a word strange to me beneath it. Said the host, "Thus we began, and my daughter Z, who belongs to the College of Sages, has been your instructress and ours too." Z then placed before me other metallic sheets on which, in my writing, other words first and then sentences were inscribed. Under each word and each sentence, strange characters in another hand. Rallying my senses, I comprehended that thus a rude dictionary had been effected. Had it been done while I was dreaming? That is enough now, said Z in a tone of command. Repose and take food. And that is that. Day, whatever this is. Why is this happening to me? I see there were a few of you. We got a few likes for that. That's pretty cool. Do we have any questions, comments, anything we want to say? Any participation we want to do before I cut this motherfucker off and call it a day? Anybody want to participate? Anybody have anything, any questions, comments, anything at all relevant to the book and the reading? Hey, that's cool if you don't. It's cool if you don't. It's a little disappointing. I would think that I read enough of it that we have something. But this book is not a good book. This is a bad book. It's bad. It's not particularly creative. The prose is awful. The sentences tend to be overwritten and a little bit difficult to tell what exactly he's saying. I don't think anybody was listening either. I don't know what we were doing. I don't know what we do when we show up to listen to somebody read a book. But I don't think we were listening. I don't think so either, Eric. But the going into the earth and meeting human or semi-human creatures, this isn't old. The setting of the book, blank somewhere in America. Somewhere in the US. He says in blank year 1800. Blank part of the US. Yeah, well, the story is it's a confessional. It's a journal entry of a guy who saw something extraordinary. And so these were written back then, like with Lovecraft. It's in the first person because it's a journal entry. So he has it redacted. He says, in blank America, it's the effect is that it's supposed to be redacted because the idea is that it's real. Yeah. These were written not like the conceit is that it's not fiction. We had no context. The first sentence of the book was the context. Get anywhere, it doesn't matter because you're under the earth. You're miles under the earth at this point. Well, yeah, that's why you start from the beginning. And the title of the video is the title of the book. The whole thing is scary. From the beginning, it starts scary. He's underground talking to non-human entities that live inside our planet and have technology that's greater than ours. The whole thing is scary to somebody in the 1900s. The title is The Coming Race. And anyway, it's Spoopyween, not Scaryween. People believe this book is nonfiction. People believe this book is real. That's because it is an Adolf Hitler title, Eric. God damn it. Start at the beginning. This book informed everything the Nazis actually believed. That's why it's spoopy. This very book informed all of Nazi mythology. Everything they believed, they cribbed from this book because they thought this book was nonfiction. They believed this book was real. Every single detail, no, it's not real. Every single detail, every character point, every single detail was in Disneyland of the Gods. Because everything that the alternate historians and the ancient aliens crowd, everything they believe is sourced to this book. Everything they believe is sourced to this book. Everything they believe is nonsense. And when you really get into it, you can't be an alternate historian or an ancient aliens believer and not a Nazi. Because the Nazis and the ancient aliens didn't diverge. The ancient aliens diverged from the Nazis. The American Nazi Party was real, and it was ancient historian and or it was alternate history and ancient aliens. They believe this stuff today. These people still believe this stuff. They don't call themselves Nazis, but they're neo-Nazis. All of them. Graham Hancock, all of them. Neo-Nazis. Every single one. They'll tell you they're not because, except for like Van Daniken, Eric von Daniken, they don't have obvious ties to Germany. No, it's not the flat Earth. This is hollow Earth. They don't believe in a flat Earth. They believe in a hollow Earth. They believe that the inside of the planet is inhabited with hyper intelligent super beings, reptiles, among other things. Eventually, we'll read David Icke for the channel. That might be next Spoopyween. I don't own any David Icke that I'm aware of. If I owned David Icke, I didn't know it. But if I've literally fallen asleep into the book, I'm not doing any good to either of us. It's my subconscious that's reading, and that's not a good read. Us, Eric. They believe that the aliens are eating us. That's what Disneyland of the Gods was about. They believe that they eat us. They believe human sacrifices were taught to us by them because they eat us. The human sacrifices of the cults like Dionysus, where Christianity got its ideas, the reasons the Romans called them cannibals is because the Dionysians they killed and ate people. Well, yeah, the politicians are the reptilians, according to David Icke, Eric. All of this, it's all one great big worldview. They all believe all of this. They pretend like they don't in public so they look sane. But people like Graham Hancock literally believe that Hillary Clinton is a different species of shape-shifting reptile. They literally believe it. The hybrid section of Disneyland with the God, or Disneyland of the Gods, there's a whole section of hybrids. People literally believe that stuff. The Indigo Children of the 70s and 80s that popped back up in the early aughts, that is this. They believe that they're hybrids with this coming race, that these people that live inside the planet. They think these Indigo Children are they think that they're hybrids. Yeah, well, that's why I'm reading it. It's funny to me. It's hilarious to me, but it's spoopy. It's horrifying because people believe it. Smart people, not smart people, powerful people believe it. And so that's why I'm reading it for the channel. This is my way of fighting back. We can laugh at it because we should be smart enough to know that this is not real. It's not real. And and anybody who was paying attention in Final Fantasy IV already recognizes everything that we've read today. Already recognizes all of it. The airships, the people with the wings. It's in Final Fantasy IV. The dwarves that you go down to in 4 are from this. Yeah. And I talk about how the first 5 Final Fantasies are a really unique look at Western mythology, at Western fantasy. It's because the dev team, Haranobu Sakaguchi or whatever his name is, the main guy, the main writer of the first 5, really the first 4, but the first 5 up to 7, the first 6, but 6 is different. The writer, the main guy who wrote the first 5, he was reading sci-fi and fantasy from the 19th and early 20th century. You can tell because it's all over his work. Well, the Air Force hiding under the sand and Shining Force 2 is a reference to Final Fantasy the First, and the airship under the sand in Final Fantasy the First is a reference to this ancient aliens bullshit. Roughly the same time frame because Shining Force was Sega ripping off Final Fantasy. Uh, you're allowed to do that in Japan. You're allowed to rip off narrative and discovery tropes like that because in Japan it's not considered. You know this probably. It's not considered like a BitTorrent. Um, it's not considered. It's not art isn't considered art unless it's obviously some element has obviously been stolen from something more famous than you. If the influence that got you to become an artist isn't obvious in the art, it's not considered art in Japan. Yeah, I know what a torrent is. I don't use torrents, but I know what they are. It's a website for selling or for sharing big files. If you know, you know. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, torrent trading was a big part of the early internet. That's gone away. Those sites got those sites were hunted down and murdered. But yeah, that's why I'm reading this stuff. My favorite horror movie is probably the first Conjuring. Well, yeah, but you could still get access to anything if you look for it. If you know what you're looking for and you want it bad enough, you can find anything. Patriots are looking like the best roster in the AFC East too. Yes, Viva la Revolucion. Yes, but against the anti-intellectuals who believe that we're controlled by reptiles. Against that, it's like I was listening to the guys in Taco Bell tonight talk about one of the guys in Taco Bell tonight talk about how he started reading more because the more you read, the more you know. And then he backed off on that. He's like, actually, that you could read bad material. And he goes, at least the more you can think about. And if some guy who you can tell has spent most of his life on drugs, and you can tell by the way he listens to the music that he listens to, this is not a smart person. This is not a person who knows anything about anything. This is a person who can't even make a taco without crushing it and will serve you a crushed taco. But this person understands that just being widely read means you can think more broadly. I would like to repeat, this is a person who gave me 4 crushed tacos and then came out to ask me if they were okay. But even he knows to read widely. And books. Yes, Eric. Listening to the crazies. Um, that's where you can really start to learn. Because sometimes just differentiating yourself from the crazy is enough to get you back toward right. And so, for example, when we're talking about these alternate historians, we're talking about the Nazis. If you want to be an independent person who comes independently to your own ideas, you're the not necessarily your intelligence, but the complexity of your speech shows the complexity of your thought. And the complexity of your thought, your intelligence is I have to be specific when I talk about intelligence, because when I'm reading and I'm talking about these neo-Nazis, I'm reading the coming race. The coming race is about a higher intelligent race, extra intelligent humans. So you have to be careful about intelligence. But the way you speak, the complexity of your speech, or the simplicity of your speech, the brevity of your speech can show your wit, right? The way you speak indicates the way you think. And the way you think is predicated. My mother said that the way we think is predicated by what we hear, what we read, what we take into our minds. We can only process what we bring in. Yeah, they don't have it. But you're right. Intelligence can be cultivated. Intelligence is like a shut off, like a you would know what I'm trying to say if I could just describe it. It's like a tube that you can widen, right? So it's a cylinder like that has a fluid that can contain a fluid that you can widen, that can grow. And really, intelligence, really what it is it's kind of you've got it's like a muscle, right? That has this fluid that goes through it, and it's got to have these real thick walls for stupid people to protect them, so that nothing can get in and actually fuck up the core thing that's them. But the more you're able to loosen and dilate that tube, the thinner the walls get, but the more that's passing through you. It's like being a channel or a conduit. That's exactly why they use these words: channel, conduit, light, energy, water. That's why these metaphors were used in the deeply ancient languages. The New Age, like John Keel was talking about in Disneyland of the Gods, they took deeply ancient ideas and metaphors that were just lying around, not being used anymore, and picked them up and started using them again to look smart. But they didn't know what they were talking about either. The metaphors. Yeah, well, I say that all the time. Metaphors are right. The metaphor is right. The person using it may not know what the fuck they're talking about. That's the difference in wisdom and truth. The wisdom, the metaphor, is right. It has validity. But the person wielding it might be an asshole who's lying to you and knows they're lying to you. And worse is an asshole who's misrepresenting the truth or the wisdom, who doesn't know what the fuck they're talking about. Like Tony Robbins is so much worse than Hitler. I mean that. Somebody like Jordan Peterson is so much worse than Hitler. It wasn't Hitler's idea. None of the stuff that Hitler did once he got elected, his idea was how to get elected. Everything that happened after that was evil people that he put in power. Yes, using words way outside their proper use or their proper context. Yes. But Plato was complaining about that in 450 BCE. I would remind you of Jordan Peterson. I spent 2 years studying him intensely. And so when we're talking about comparison and contrasting or differentiating yourself from someone, I modeled a lot of what I'm doing out of differentiation from that guy, specifically that guy. I used to say as such the way he does, and when I'm really thinking out a thought that I've never spoken before, I say blank as such a lot. Yeah, the problem with Jordan Peterson is that he's got the face and he knows how to do the act, but everything he says is bullshit. So he has the look. He has the look of a philosopher. He knows how to behave in that way because that's what you're taught when you go to school, to university. That's what they teach you, is how to act like an academic, how to behave like a professional thinker. And so he has that down, but everything that comes out of his brain is bullshit. But I figured out it's because he has a guy. He has a guy he's speaking for. There's a guy that's behind all of those people that Jordan Peterson hangs out with. There's a guy. There's one cult leader. There's one. Yeah, the feminists were trying to get him because he was winning. He was right. His rhetoric on that was right. But there's one charismatic figure behind all of those guys that Jordan Peterson is associated with. I know who he is. He gets out in public sometimes. Jordan Peterson says his name a lot, way too often, but nobody is caught on because Jordan Peterson has his own little cult of personality going on, his own little charisma cult going on. And so his cultists, his charisma cultists aren't paying attention. They're not following the money. They're not trying to figure out this cult. What is this and what is their agenda? I was, and I don't have an answer because that obsession kind of put me in this tent. So I had to back off because it had become self-harm. And well, the perpetual propping up of Jordan Peterson in the media is because he's Canadian and because he's a Canadian political refugee. That has nothing to do with him. It has everything to do with him saying fuck you about trans rights in Canada, which is a battle that's been over for a minute in the US. I don't even want to know. Don't even. I just told you that my obsession with him had become self-harm. I don't even want to know. I don't even want to know, Eric. I really don't. I've tuned out for a full year. For a full year of my life, I'm very serious. I tuned out for a full year, and I talk about him a lot because it's confession to self-harm. He's how I cut. And I need to remain away from that. It negatively affects my ability to sleep. I'm not proud of that. I'm really not. I don't share it to get kudos. I don't want, No, I'm not asking you to let me be. I am about to end this because I do need to go to sleep. I'm just telling you. I'm just trying to be very honest with you that it's funny. It should be funny to a normal person. It should be. And so I encourage you to make fun. I encourage you to laugh. I just don't want to know the specifics. And then I need that good sleep because I'm gonna I'm going to be right back at it tomorrow. And I'm getting more decisive in how I spend my time. So good sleep helps with that. They do their best. I can't know what they've seen and what they haven't seen. I can't know whether they're trying to have an actual conversation and they just have no social skills, or whether they're trying to cause trouble and this is the first time they've ever been around. Yeah. Not always, Sandman. Usually not, actually. Usually not. I have been told that when I have my emotions completely under control, that it's actually deeply uncanny, very frightening. When people are frightened of you, life is a lot more difficult. Machiavelli made this very clear. That the preference is for them to love you, but if you can't make them love you, it's better that they fear you than that they are indifferent toward you. Does that protect inner peace? Are you at inner peace because people are afraid of you? And again, the prince was very clear. Machiavelli was very clear in the prince. When people fear you, they work to destroy you. Can you ever be at peace when the people around you are working to destroy you? Just logically. Fear doesn't bring respect, fear brings fear. It's always better to be loved than to be feared. But if you can't be loved, it's better to be feared than for them to view you with indifference. It's better to be feared than ignored. But fear doesn't bring respect. Fear brings hate. Love brings respect. Virtue. Virtue is respectable. Think about it. Do we respect the Soviet Union? No, not to each his own. You don't even believe that, Sandman. If my way was to fucking eat kids, you wouldn't say that's okay. You wouldn't say meh to that. You didn't fear the Germans, and you didn't respect them. The question wasn't whether we feared them. The question was whether fear brings respect. You're all over the place. You're just saying things that are mutually inconclusive now. You're just talking mutually inconsistent things now. You're just all over the place, trying to support an argument that you know isn't true to a Philaletea, a lover of truth. You don't even believe what you're saying. You're just trying to win an argument with someone who's already won. And now you're just a priori denying things. I have the high ground, Anakin. Virtue is always more respectable. It's very easy logic gates to arrive at virtue. Very easy logic gates. And there's something like 3,000 years of a written philosophical tradition laying out those logic gates. No, I can do whatever I want. And responding to you, you said to each his own, to which I said not to each his own. If my own, if my way, what I believed was the right way to live, the best way to live, the good life was fucking and eating children, you would not say, ah, well, relative, that's his way, to him his own. Absolutely, you don't even believe that dumb shit. You just don't believe that dumb shit. You believe I'm allowed to be wrong because there's nobody who's actually testing us. And that's fine. But moral relativism has no place anywhere. You don't mean it. You don't even believe it. You went moral relativism on preserving uh, personal peace. Actions versus emotions, precisely. If what made me peaceful on the inside so that my emotions weren't outwardly expressed in a way that you didn't believe was healthy to me was to eat kids, you wouldn't tell me that that is okay. You would tell me I need to find another way toward inner peace. Just because you're too stupid to follow the logic chain and your ability and your effort to deny it doesn't mean I'm wrong, Sandman. It just means you're very stupid. And that's okay. Read more broadly. You can do that with a Taco Bell job. They might even send you to college if you ask. Do better, but do it somewhere else. No, my friend, you're very stupid. You tried to argue with me. That was very stupid of you. Goodbye. And I see you, Abs, right as I'm trying to leave. How you doing, pal? So I preserve my inner peace with violence by ending capriciously people who want to try to get under my inner peace. We'll see if Sandman figures out what just happened to him or not. Probably not. They never actually do. Yeah, he was just going around in circles. He'd got lost in his own argument. He no longer knew what he was trying to argue. He no longer knew what the argument was about. Do I have a trebuchet? That's funny, Eric. Trebuchet is a word I don't hear very often. It's not a word I have an opportunity to say out loud very often either. It's a fun word, trebuchet. It is exactly one thing. A trebuchet. See, you can catapult. You can catapult things without a catapult, but you don't trebuchet anything. Trebuchet is a trebuchet, and I love that. Oh man, I'm an asshole. I'm an asshole. Ah. All right, dudes. Thank you for showing up to today's reading. We read, I think, the first six. Now, I said that an author shouldn't do that shit. Shouldn't do that shit to you. You should feel like that was enough for me to read today after one chapter, and he did. He, whatever. The first five chapters weren't. They were one chapter. Really, the first six chapters, but there was a whole unconsciousness period between five and six. But anyway, thank you for hello dog lover. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to that. I would recommend for anyone who is stuck around in the live who did not listen that you check that out. That's what Spoopyween is about. We're here to read books that I think are horrifying for reasons beside the book. Eric and I went through that at the end. We discussed how the first six chapters or how this book horrifies me, and how it's related to the book that I read for Spoopyween for the first 12 episodes of Spoopyween. We'll be back at it tomorrow, sometime after midnight. I definitely recommend checking these out as standalone videos. You can find them in my lives tab. It's too late. It's too late, and I'm too tired. I'm actually nodding off. I'm not going to play Schedule 1 tonight. I may play Schedule 1 tomorrow. Or I may play Schedule 1 tomorrow. In the morning, but there's a hella bad glare that comes through here. So we'll see. Tomorrow, guys. Thank you for being here, Abs. Thank you for showing up. I appreciate you, man. The support means more than you guys really appreciate, I think. And yeah, sleepy boys, sleepy. So I will be talking to you guys tomorrow. We'll be playing something in Panera unless the upload speeds are laggy. If they're laggy, I'll be on Discord. So you'll know if you can see my face after about noon, especially if I'm in Panera, that means that the Panera upload speeds are laggy, and then I'm in the Discord. If you come into the Discord and I'm not in the voice chat, that means I'm probably on YouTube. If you can't figure it out, ask somebody in the Discord. Or I guess just hit me up in the comments here on YouTube. Or if you really need to know, you really need to know, $50 a month on Patreon, and you can have access to me either on DMs or text message. It's that simple. But as soon as that 50 a month lapses, you will not have that access to me, and you will probably get a fuck you for how you ended it. So, thank you. Have a good morning, have a good night, have a good evening, have a good afternoon. Whatever it is for you, whenever it is for you, wherever you are, however you are right now. I hope that until I see you again, everything goes well. And I'm going to be fine being warm. It is cold, but I keep having to unzip this sleeping bag because I'm getting over warm. So we're going to be just fine tonight. You will see me later, Abs. I will see your PFP later. Be well, Eric. I don't like hugs, but high fives or maybe like a fist bump or like an elbow bump to you too, buddy. I don't like being touched. It has nothing to do with my affection for you. I just don't like being touched. Be well, guys. Really. It means a lot to me that you're well. When I see you here, even if it's just so I know that you're well, just seeing you pass through so I know you're well means a lot to me. So be well.